In the opinion of this reporter, if this nation, or in fact the world, ever needed heroes, that time is now. That time is now.
Okay.
You set?
Yeah, I'm set.
Tito?
Bill, is that you? Are you there, Bill? It's me, Tito.
Is the water warm enough?
Yes, Bill.
Shall we begin?
Yes, Lisa. I mean,
All right, we're back with the Tito and Bill Goodtime Hour.
welcome back to the Goodtime Hour.
Yeah, and we're going to have
a good
time. And the last two episodes, again, we had the unplanned memorial for David Bowie, and then we went over our favorite rock-oriented books. But this time we're turning off the record player and the CD, and we're going over and hitting the on button to the television.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking about our favorite shows, restricting it pretty much to Saturday mornings and syndicated programs, that we would see in the afternoon. So we're going through our favorite shows when we were kids.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of age difference between us, and there's also a difference of geography between us. So we may have had some different experiences growing up, and I'm really interested to hear about some locality differences about what we were watching when we were watching it. So this might be a lot of fun. Now, I put together my 10, Tito, and immediately I broke the rules. Because when we were talking about this, we had said it would be stuff that was on Saturday mornings or, syndicated packages that were there in the afternoons or early in the mornings as kids. And the first show I picked up, which would have been my number 10, I broke the rule, but I think it's something that we have to address because I think it probably is the most important television series for most people who were born after 1965, and that's Sesame Street.
Exactly. Okay,
So
yeah.
That was initially my number 10 because I can't conceive of a point where I was a conscious being where Sesame Street wasn't part of my adolescence. Even at the time when you had outgrown it, you saw neighbors' kids having Sesame Street toys. It was just always around. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I have two much younger sisters. 17. One is 17 years apart, younger than me. The other one is 25 years younger than me. But it is interesting their experience, comparing my Sesame Street experiences and what you and I and my brother, my same age brothers and sisters. I'm about Grover and Cookie Monster, and they're Elmo. So there's, it's very, but it's same but different.
Yeah. The Elmo is I don't relate, but we had Grover. No. We had Grover, and
give me Grover any day.
And I talked about this in the past on Comic Book Bears. The first example of metafiction I ever remember was Grover the Monster at the end of this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many times I read that book. I can't, because it takes 3 minutes to go through it, but I can't tell you how many times. Oh my God.
And every time you're just surprised every time.
Yeah, there's something you're just hoping for a different outcome with that one panel when the bricks are on top of his head. You are very strong. I mean, it's imprinted what this book is like. So, but it was a very important television experience for us, and I think that was also the first time that I went back specifically to something when Mr. Hooper died.
Oh my gosh,
and
I remember that.
I really think that was the first time that people, because when that happened, I'm going to say it was like 12 or 13 or so, and it was just a very deliberate experience. It wasn't so, I turned this on and there's, we sought that out when we knew that would air. Because I mean, for me, in some ways, that's kind of like a goodbye to childhood just because of time.
I remember them watching the Today Show back to TV. You know, the TV show that I used to watch all the time as a kid was the Today Show before with Jane Pauley. And I remember they were talking with a couple of the creators of Sesame Street, representatives from the Children Television's Workshop. And I'm blanking on her name, but the woman who played Maria, and just explaining that that whole episode. And we can't hide this. We can't sugarcoat this for kids. And one thing which I continue to love about Sesame Street is they didn't insult children's intelligence. They didn't talk down to them. The humor was it wasn't, set up. There you go, ha ha ha, someone fell and blah 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 blah. It felt like we were all equal adults, or how they say grown-ups in their case, and all of us were learning together and going on this journey and exploring together. And same thing with Jim Henson in general.
Yeah. Were you in a bilingual household?
I was talking to someone about this earlier. Growing up until about 1980, prior to 1980, it was a Spanish-only household. And it seemed like overnight we just started speaking. We knew English, obviously, but our mother just stopped talking to us in Spanish. It was just overnight. It was like, okay, Tito, wake up. I'm like, huh?
It's the 80s.
And I honestly think it was Ronald Reagan when Reagan was elected. I kind of associated that, I remember my mother saying, "Oh, this is our new president." I'm like, "Oh, no, fuck him," without even really knowing anything about him. But my 5-year-old, fuck him.
But were you also like privy to like the shows that were kind of based around multiculturalism that were like Sesame Street, like Villa Alegre or Caracas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I wish I can see those shows. I mean, I know a lot of those Via Alegres are back on YouTube, but I haven't seen those in decades. So how they still hold up.
Yeah. All right. Well, just getting that little sidebar out of the way, and we're going to go forward here and tell people about our 10 favorite shows when we were growing up. And this ought to be a lot of fun. I just can't imagine.
Laughing.
I cannot imagine the tangents. So why don't you start there, sir, with your number 10?
I will start with, and this is really no particular order.
Okay. I was very precise about what was number 1 and number 10, so. But whatever.
But I we're talking about Saturday mornings. I'm probably going to break the rule over here, but growing up, NBC's Saturday night prime time lineup, which I really honestly believe, and this is from maybe 78 to 84, was really, I mean, Saturday night TV shows are geared towards old people and children because, they're not going out. They're not going to the club on Saturday nights, But, and I put these, and this is kind of weird, I kind of put these all together. Different Strokes, Facts of Life, Silver Spoons, Give Me a Break. We're all part of that, but I'm going to say Different Strokes.
Okay.
That was a show, right time, right place. I was probably 6 or 7 when it debuted, and it was just heaven. I thought it was heaven. Saturday night, great, no school. You're up, kind of, sort of late, watching this hilarious, really stupid show, but Gary Coleman, when I was a little kid, I thought he was the funniest thing ever. And I thought that whole situation was, looking back at it now, I think it's kind of a messed up situation. I honestly believe in the 80s, black kids were not allowed to have parents. They only were allowed to have white parents on TV. Webster or even that backdoor pilot from the Brady Bunch, Kelly's Kids.
Oh, which was like the Three Musketeers, sort of, with the
the United Nations and stuff. But I love that show. I loved it up until Arnold got older and they replaced him with Sam McKinney, Danny Cooksey, the little redhead kid, because he was no longer cute. But I stuck with that show almost up until the end.
Ooh, you're brave. Ooh.
Yes. And
all right.
I always wanted a penthouse, a black goldfish, and a hot tub, and a rich white father.
I remember the episode where I couldn't cotton to the show anymore. Was when somebody gave away Arnold's favorite doll, and it was Paddington Bear.
Yes,
and I'm watching it, I'm thinking, like, you can get a Paddington Bear anywhere. Like
Yeah,
what is
and
this like?
it was
What is this like
good.
cross country search thing? Like get in the car. I'll go to Bradley's with you. I'll show you where they are.
Dude, I had a Paddington Bear. My mom got me
Yeah.
one at the Broadway.
All right. Well, my number 10 is
Mhm.
something where I kind of played with both the Saturday morning and the syndication. Uh,
Mhm.
so in 1978, there was a syndication package called Hanna-Barbera's World of Super Adventure. And
Yes.
this was one that combined 7 shows that originally aired in the 60s on, on network television on Saturday mornings. It was Space Ghost, Shazam,
Mhm.
Moby Dick and the
Mhm.
Mighty Mightor, Herculoids, Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles, Fantastic Four, and Birdman and the Galaxy Trio. And up until that point in 78, these were only shows I heard about apart from Space Ghost because there were some
Mhm.
reruns on Saturday morning for that.
Mhm.
And if you ever see these shows, they don't hold up from a storytelling standpoint. But just these absolutely beautiful character designs, mostly by Alex Toth, who was
Mhm.
primarily known as a comic book artist, but then transitioned to animation in the late 60s and kept up with it. And we'll get back to him a little later. I think I have a more fondness of the discovery than actually enjoying these episodes, but I also think it's a way of my tipping a hat to Hanna-Barbera because oh my God, there was so much Hanna-Barbera content that was in front of me growing up, and that's my number 10. So it's
Wow.
a little bit of a cheat, 7 shows in one.
'Cause I'm gonna cheat with my next one too. So
Okay.
again, maybe 79, 80, they packaged all of the Sid and Marty Krofft shows
Mhm.
in the evening, so maybe around 5 o'clock in where I lived in Los Angeles, and it was packaged as Krofft Superstars. So
Mhm.
every day of the week they would show either you would get a Land of the maybe two of them, maybe two a day, a Land of the
Mhm.
Lost and a Bugaloos and Far Out Space Nuts and a Bigfoot and Wild Boy.
Mhm.
But this 79, 80, we used to go to after school daycare. I was really young, kindergarten, first grade, single household, working mom, latchkey kids. Before we weren't even latchkey kids, we were just dropped off. So when we would wait after we would do the after school care, activities, sandboxes, all that sorts of good stuff. And when we would wait for our mom to pick us up in the little waiting room, they would have the TV on, and it was always on. And I always associate Sid and Marty Krofft with the daycare place we went to was called Gateway, and when we were in the waiting room, it was always on when we were waiting for our mom to show up. So whenever I always associate that with that real goofy time in our lives and watching really goofy TV, where even as a 5-year-old, I'm still trying to make sense of what the hell I was watching, but I couldn't stop watching.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah.
But I thought the Bugaloos were just super cool. I loved their hair even back then, and I loved the songs back then, and I just remember lots of googly eyes, and
Yeah.
again, you just questioning what the hell am I watching? But I
Yeah.
can't stop
I have
watching
to
it.
say,
It was like nicotine for children.
I never warmed to the Sid and Marty Krofft shows.
Oh,
They
dude.
always freaked me out as a little kid. Maybe when we hit 17, 18 and we're enjoying some other things, maybe it would have been a good
Yeah.
time to revisit. But for me, they were indicative of something that was emblematic for me with children's television in the 70s.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's a sort of paranoia in a
Uh-huh.
lot of that stuff. I think Land of the Lost,
Oh my
it's
gosh.
that you totally have that's like in full bloom there. Where
Mhm.
there's this element of if only we had not done this, we wouldn't be in this predicament. And every chance we have to get out of it will somehow backfire.
It's like Gilligan's Island, but like
Yeah.
on crack, It's
Yeah,
like,
it's like I mean Lidsville was like that, which was
oh my
out
God.
of all those shows, Lidsville is by far the creepiest. I
For
mean,
me, it was
ooh.
Dr. Shrinker. He was just shrinking people for no friggin' reason other than just to shrink them.
But yeah, the Sid and Marty Krofft stuff, I always found it really damaged and creepy,
It was very whimsical, and there was,
yeah,
it frightened me, but it fascinated me at the same time.
yeah,
And I think that's the same thing that attracted me to Kiss. There
uh-huh,
were these clowns, and are they going to actually kill me? but I want more. And my mother hated it, so which makes me like it even more. And my mother was like, "I wish they wouldn't show you that crap here. It's really disturbing." And it makes so she doesn't like it, so it must be
Good.
intriguing.
They must be
And
doing something right.
I'm saying all of this as I'm staring at my Sid and Marty Krofft Bugaloos print that I got at Comic-Con a few years ago, signed by Sid and Marty Krofft right now. But
All right, my number 9. And this was a show that I think I had a tremendous affinity for because it was so sporadic, the availability to watch it when I was growing up. And that goes to what was originally known as Rocky and His Friends, later became the Bullwinkle Show, probably best known as Rocky and Bullwinkle. And the show was in production, I think, for about 6 years or so, and then repeats and these amazing series that supported Rocky and Bullwinkle, like Mr. Peabody and Sherman and Fractured Fairy Tales and the World of Commander McBragg. That was probably my favorite out of the supplementary series on that. And it's if people have never watched it, I think even erudite people today will be knocked out by how literate that show is. And there were some jokes that it wasn't until I was in college and took some literary classes that I actually got some of the jokes.
The dialogue on those shows are just amazing. Recently, my brother and I were watching those, and we're just like, oh my gosh, there's just so much stuff going on that no wonder how could a 10-year-old just wrap their head around this? But there was a flow to it. And, but yeah, exactly.
Yep. Okay, what's next on your countdown there?
Next on my list is, and I think this is one that we kind of both agree on, The Little Rascals, Our Gang / Our Gang. It was on here in Los Angeles Sunday mornings, and it was really early on KTLA, Channel 5, Independent. And from what I remember, a local TV personality, Tom Hatton, would introduce those. He would also introduce Popeye also, and the Pippi Longstocking movies, and he hosted a show called the Family Film Festival, but it was part of that kind of series that he would host, The Little Rascals. Kids doing whatever the heck they want. Parents are no longer, it's almost like the Peanuts, either the adults are either looked upon as buffoons or they're non-existent or these abstract characters, but that it's almost like the Marx Brothers timing and physical comedy and even the dialogue. It was just oh my, wonderful kids doing whatever they want, and it was inspiring. It was just inspiring for little kids. Like, you can do whatever you want. You could build a fort, and you can go to the beach or hitch a ride to downtown, and hopefully an old lady will give you some money. You can get your pit bull out of Hawk because the dog catcher took it. And it again, just a sense of wonder.
In the New York market,
stinking cute.
And stinking cute, but at the same token, these weren't kids being precocious. These were kids.
No.
These were very natural kids, and Hal Roach was really great at casting. Because these were not kids. These weren't mugging for the camera at all. No, these were kids as close as you could get to acting naturally. And the farther away I get from the viewing experience of Little Rascals, I realize how many firsts that series provided. It's the first time I think you ever saw black and white kids treating each other as equals.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's something when you had these arguments, but primarily in the 80s, deriding the series. I mean, if there was any series that shouldn't have been derided for racial issues, it was this one. And I can't tell you, for the core talkies, the Roach Studio ones, the MGM ones are terrible for the most part.
Oh, dude.
Yeah,
no,
that's when they started going into that precocious, aren't these kids so cute?
Oh yeah, with Beretta, I couldn't.
Oh yeah, and Froggy, yeah, that's woo.
I'm like, no, I'm gonna watch Star Trek. Bye.
Yeah, baby, that's a slow death. But when you get to the Roach Studio era of the talkies era for these, and it's some of the best comedy that's ever been put on screen. And also in the New York market, you were saying that they were aired on Sunday mornings. New York, we had them. It was super saturated.
Wow.
They were on every day, sometimes morning and afternoon, depending upon the year.
Gosh, wow.
Yeah, so we had a lot of Little Rascals there, so maybe that'll be on my list later.
Because I know you have a little bit more to say about them and Hal Roach and all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that a little bit later.
We'll get there. We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah. Just revisit it. You mentioned local TV, and the next show on my list, my number 8, is a show that aired on CBS, and it was actually in production for 1 year, 1972 to 1973. But okay, Tito, you had mentioned local TV in relation to how the Little Rascals were aired around a local show, effectively. My number 8 is a local show which aired on WCBS TV in New York. It may have aired in some other areas of the country, but not as long as it did in New York, because I think they made, like 1 year of episodes and then just repeated them for years and years. And this was a show called The Patchwork Family. Which was hosted by Carol Corbett and her puppet sidekick Rags. You had these regulars like Ed Ricciuti of the Bronx Zoo who'd bring on animals, sort of like a Jack Hanna type. And it was a show that directly talked to people. You can do this too while we're doing it. And I just have a lot of fond memories of that show. It aired right before the Saturday morning, the network block. That was one show where I just, I probably saw every episode like 16 times, and just loved it. Just absolutely loved it, because it was one of those shows that was, one that in some ways broke the fourth wall and talked directly to you. And there were other shows like that, like The Magic Garden, which we had in New York, which I think was syndicated for a while. And I think the Newzoo Review did that in some context.
Oh
too.
my gosh, yeah.
So there were shows that were like that. Certainly Mr. Rogers did that, but there was something really warm and inviting about the way the Patchwork Family did that, because some of it was based on exercise, some of it was based on drawing, some of it was singing, where it would almost be like what do you call it? Like a sing along things, like the old films with the follow the bouncing ball.
All the bouncing balls.
But it was a little bit more hippie-ish, with like computer, not really computer graphics, but there's a clip on YouTube and you'll understand if you see it. So that is my pick, and that's The Patchwork Family. So
I have never heard of that. I'm going to research that as soon as I get off here. I'm intrigued.
There is one clip that is in circulation, which is it's like about 7 minutes long, and you don't get a flavor of the entire show, but you do get the theme song twice, and you do see Carol Corbett and Rags, so that's good. All right, what's next up in your list here? Your number
next
7.
one. You mentioned that there was 16 episodes and that they just repeated over and over again. This is another PBS show. It's called 3-2-1 Contact, and it was another one of those. It was a science-based TV show geared, for kids, and it involved a lot of. There was, I think, 2 seasons or 2 casts. Teenage kids kind of met in a clubhouse and would do science experiments and talk to, guests, and they would even have these kind of outside, little vignettes or segments. This is another show, and of course, science is great. We love science all. They had an episode called, what was it called? Something about, building and destructing. But they did a story about what goes into making a Kiss concert happen.
Oh.
And it was from the 79 Dynasty tour, and and it was just a technical side of what goes on to putting on this big production, the pyrotechnics. And that is another key, probably one of the biggest key elements. There's 2 things that made me a humongoid Kiss fan. 2 cousins of ours who lived in East LA, they were 14 and 15. Their rooms were plastered with Kiss, scared the hell out of me, but I just wanted more. And that episode of 3-2-1 Contact of them showing what goes into and they even had the kid, one of the girls from the clubhouse was talking to the lighting manager and the pyrotechnic guy, and it showed them putting up the lighting grid, and at the end the big Kiss concert all happens, and I just remember them doing King of the Nighttime World and thinking that was just the coolest thing ever. But obviously, aside from that, I thought that was just a wonderful show.
Yeah.
And I think everything I know from science I learned from that show and stuff like that. And also, during I think maybe the second season or the second cast, they would in the middle of the show they would do the short the Bloodhound Gang, which was about these teenage detectives, and so that was from 3-2-1 Contact, and that was just such a great show. I wish that would go. And there was even a magazine also based off of that show that came up monthly, which we had my brother and I had a subscription to, and it was great. So,
okay. I barely remember 3-2-1 Contact.
Oh my gosh, I'm singing the song.
Yeah, I have some recollection of it being on. I just don't remember watching it too much. But again, that was probably hitting when I was getting out of children's TV.
Yeah, I'm thinking for me it was 82, 83, 84. Yeah.
I do remember, though, when you were talking about a KISS segment, I remember that there was a junior version of 60 Minutes called 30 Minutes that aired on CBS, and one of the segments was a guy named Danny. I don't know how I remember the guy's name, and he was roadieing for the police.
Oh, wow.
And this was on the Regatta de Blanc tour. So this isn't a point where they're, mega successful. They're still on their rise, still playing 3,000 seaters probably at that point. And, they brought up like issues of economics. And we have enough money to get to this date. We're hoping the record company provides a little more money. And that's like, wild to throw at it. Like an 11-year, 12-year-old kid was like the economics of touring. But I just remember that. And that was, just as I was getting into music a bit. And it must have been a very similar segment to what you saw there with the 3-2-1 Contact.
They used to have here in CBS Saturday morning cartoons, and this is pre-1982, they would have little news segments in between the Saturday morning cartoons. CBS, I remember seeing the Globe and having little news segments for kids, and it wasn't talking down to kids. It wasn't like two little kids being the anchors. It was just an adult voice talking frankly about what's going on in the Middle East, or talking about the gas crisis, or and I just thought that was very looking back, that's extremely progressive. Yeah, and then now here's Bigfoot and Wild Boy, or Arc 2. Yeah, that was the show. But,
the 70s was the only time a post-apocalyptic children's show could work.
Oh gosh.
And we had two of them. We had Arc 2, and we also had Return to the Planet of the Apes.
Oh my gosh.
We had a couple, and I'm sure if Land of the Lost was like almost kind of in that vibe too. Yeah. Just like I said, there's a weird paranoia that goes through a lot of children's television in the 70s.
Yeah.
But my next pick is, I don't want to say children's television, but juvenile television from the 50s. Now, I avoided shows like Gilligan's Island and Batman, the 66 Batman, and Star Trek and Brady Bunch. I Love Lucy for that matter as well. I avoided those shows in this list since they were adult shows. And I just in compiling this list, I put those to the side. But there was one show which started out with a much more mature perspective and then really juveniled it down. But my number 7 is from the 1950s, The Adventures of Superman with George Reeves. And
I used to watch that, yeah.
And it really is like two shows in one, because the black and white episodes are so different from the color episodes.
I don't think I've ever seen the color episodes, but yeah.
The black and white episodes are effectively like crime noir on television.
Yeah.
They're very serious. Phyllis Coates as Lois Lane has the best scream you will ever hear from an actor. You'd run to this lady's rescue, like even if you were like tied up. She just had that.
I'll save you.
When they transitioned over to the color episodes and No Ill No Wheel as Lois Lane, it was much more kiddie based. But to me, my Superman in my head still sounds like George Reeves. Batman and Adam West came first for viewing, just because of the way things were in syndication packages growing up. I didn't get The Adventures of Superman until about 75, where I was watching Batman from like 73 on or so. Yeah, so that's my number 7, and it's going to be the start of a lot of superheroics on my list. That doesn't shock anybody. So what's next for you there?
Yeah, no, back to the Superman. Yeah, I watched it because it was on in syndication. I watched it all the time,
Mm-hmm.
even though I thought it was kind of goofy because my Superman is always Christopher Reeves.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, wow, this is kind of goofy, even though here's a guy who looks like Ward Cleaver saving saving the
Mm-hmm.
streets of Metropolis. But yeah,
Yeah.
but my next show is Robotech.
Okay.
Robotech, Japanese. It is not considered anime, I believe, but
Oh,
I'm
I would
not an
say it's anime. I think
yeah,
it
yeah.
falls
I'm
under
not an
that
anime
category. Yeah.
aficionado. I like what I like,
Uh-huh.
which is barely scratching the surface. But I really connected with this TV show.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was. I loved at this point. I'm trying to think. 84, 85, 86. I loved Transformers. I loved robots. And I still loved Star Wars, even though it wasn't as at the forefront as it was. 3 years ago with Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
That was, but I still really connected with this show because it had all of those elements that I love, transforming robots in outer space. And maybe because I was a little gay boy, I just loved the whole soap opera element of
Mm-hmm.
this thing. There was a love triangle. There was this, floating city in space, and then, it was like a Japanese robot novella for kids,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Salvadoran, so there was a lot of novellas and a lot of Spanish-speaking dramas in that were being watched in the households.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was something that it was a little novella of my own, and there was toys attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
and oh gosh, it was just great. And when it first aired, I made it a point to see every single episode. One of our uncles died, and my mother pulled us out of school so we can go to his funeral. And I'm like, I'm missing this freaking episode. That's all I was thinking about. I'm like, you motherfucker, you had to fucking die at this time.
Yeah, that was something.
And of course, this was before internet, before TiVo, so
Yeah.
you had to wait another 3 months to see what
Mm-hmm.
happened.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you. With growing up with a brother, did you ever have like fights over what to watch, or
No,
were you kind of in sync?
we fought over everything but TV, because we're a year and a half apart, so a lot of our interests are still back then and now are still parallel,
Mm-hmm.
and our experiences are very parallel, and so no, I think the only conflict barely that we had was really with our sister. I mean, even though we liked a lot of the same primetime shows,
Mm-hmm.
she had to watch Little House on the Prairie, and then we had to, wait. But as the 80s progressed, we got more TV, so that was kind of alleviated.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Robotech was just huge for my brother and I, and it's funny, he still has a lot of the toys, so he took custody of those, and he's the guardian of those. But
Yeah.
yeah.
My exposure to Robotech was very spotty because at the time that the show started in '85, I was already in college. And in the Philadelphia market, which is the market that served the University of Delaware, it aired at like 6:30 in the morning. And there was no way I was up at 6:30 in the morning. Even if I wanted to watch it, I would still be out. And and I did have some exposure to it through the Kamiko comic book series, which actually is interesting in that they had 3 parallel series corresponding with the 3 storylines, which came from the 3 separate series that Robotech was based on, and which I actually watched last year. I watched all of Macross, I watched all of Southern Cross, and then Genesis Climber Mos Pieta.
Sentinels.
So I haven't seen all of Robotech. Someday I will. I have the entire series because you can get it for like dirt cheap and very.
Oh yeah, I got one of the seasons for like $4 down the street from my house.
I think I got
when those first hit the market, they were insanely expensive, and I got them for my brother for his birthday maybe 10 years ago, and it was not cheap at the time.
And now it's like I think you can get there's one set where you can get the entire series for like 20, maybe.
Yeah.
So someday I'll get to it, but I have watched the original Japanese. And
so good.
Yeah, someday I will. Same thing with Voltron. I don't have much experience watching Voltron, yet last year I watched all of Go Lion.
Dude, I have not seen I've seen a few episodes of Go Lion, but dude, Voltron was another huge. Yeah.
Okay. I'm continuing with the superhero experience and cheating here a little bit, throwing 2 shows together at once. So my next pick is the Shazam ISIS Hour.
So good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Filmation, which was known up
Mhm.
until Shazam as a animation house, started branching into live action with Shazam and the Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters, which would have been 74 and 75. And then as the 70s were on, they brought out other live action series like ISIS and Space Academy and Jason of Star Command and Arc 2,
So good.
which we briefly
Yeah.
mentioned. And it's also amazing. Like, you go watch these episodes now, and there's some name actors that are in there doing guest spots, like whether it's Jim Backus or what's his name, Dr. Smith. Oh God, Jonathan Harris. And with Shazam and ISIS, you had the novelty of superheroes, and it was, pretty much a well-cast show, both of them. Okay, this is like one of the weirdest Billy Z confessionals here. I used to run out of the room briefly and then run back in for ISIS because I was scared of hieroglyphics. Which has to be like the craziest thing, but hieroglyphics to this day, Egyptian hieroglyphics I'm a little uneasy watching them. I think I had a nightmare after I went to the King Tut exhibit that ran through the States in the 70s, and I think that's where it's from, but I'm not sure. And there was a moment where Isis transforms, and because she's she's a reincarnation of an Egyptian goddess. You see a lot of hieroglyphics as she's changing from Andrea Thomas to Isis. And I used to briefly run out of the room. Okay, I hear ISIS, and then I come back in. But yeah, the Shazam ISIS Hour is going to be my number 6.
Just remind me never to play or to post a picture of the Power Slave album cover for
That's
you.
okay. You know what? It ain't nothing like the Amityville Horror. It ain't nothing like
true.
that freaked me out. But it's there was a point where I was really scared of hieroglyphics.
I did not know that.
Yeah. What's next up on your list there? We're at the halfway point already. What is next? Wow.
And it's funny that I'm going to go back to PBS, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
I was worried about Sesame Street, and you're like, everything is PBS for you, but that's okay.
Everything, dude.
Yeah.
Sesame Street, dude. First of all, a little back to Sesame Street. That was my first exposure to the Pointer Sisters and James Taylor. So that's a good thing. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. That's how my mother learned how to speak English. And I honestly believe that he knew who I was and knew what my name is. And I, as messed up as this planet is, especially now, I think it would be infinitely worse if it weren't for Mr. Rogers, because he taught you to love yourself, love others, treat people kindly and with respect, and maybe you'll get that same treatment back. But there's something even when I'm at my, to this day, even recently when I'm at my lowest emotionally, it's always good to have a comforting voice like Mr. Rogers telling me that things are going to be okay and that you're a good person by just your being. There's only one person like you, and therefore you've already won because you're the best person that you can. I'm getting teary-eyed right now. And people who know my story, I'm going through a divorce right now, and I just for the fuck of it, I typed in on YouTube, Mr. Rogers and divorce, and he just nailed it. How. Divorce as a kid. My parents divorced when I was 4 years old. I had no idea what was going on. So, but he says divorces, weddings, buying houses, those are all grown up things. Don't worry about that right now. But then I'm realizing, wait a minute, I'm 41 years old now. I'm a grown up now and I'm going through these things right now. But he, even talking to a 41-year-old via YouTube 30 years later, I still felt, it's not the end of the world, that I'm still worthy of being a good person, Yeah. Oh gosh, but Mr. Rogers, love that man. Wish he was still around today.
Yeah. One of my favorite pictures ever is a picture of Fred Rogers with the Dalai Lama, and it just exudes goodness.
Yes.
It's just two men smiling, shaking their hands, but there's just something about the aura that both of these people project that you kind of feel safe.
Yes.
Just looking at it. And the other thing about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is, with these kids today, but, as time has gone older, shows have gotten more graphic intensive. They've gotten, the special effects are just things that we couldn't even contemplate growing up as kids. And just thinking of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood with puppets whose mouths didn't even move.
They didn't move. You just the person's hand was just bob the head. You just that means they're talking.
Oh my God! And like
You bring
to
up
this
that
day, if I
picture
ever
of,
see somebody that looks like Lady Elaine Fairchild, I'm running. Not a pretty lady.
oh my gosh, no, Lady Elaine Fairchild. Are you sure that isn't Madam from fucking Wayland Flowers and Madam in more drag?
Yeah.
You mentioned the picture of Fred Rogers and the Dalai Lama. My favorite picture of him is Mr. Rogers with Coco the sign language gorilla.
Uh-huh.
There's a picture of him just kind of like with the gorilla, and I just think everything. You look at that and you just realize there is still some good in this world, or there was, or there's still hope.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And also a great soundtrack. The person who I can't think of his name right now, but the person who did the piano, the opening theme, and the music for the piano player, that jazz piano was just
and
just so
they would
hit,
have like
so hit.
really accomplished jazz musicians on
Yeah.
that show stopping by, and
Gosh, I'll never forget Lynn Swan talking about football, and then Lynn Swan talking about he would take jazz singing, a scatting class, and they were scatting together. Stupid dooby doo, they just singing together. And Mr. Rogers, it's great, wonderful.
yeah, it's kind of funny when you talk about kids shows from when you were growing up. You can say like, okay, there's still a Sesame Street. There's a show that's like The Electric Company. There's a show that's kind of like Zoom. There really isn't a show out there that's like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
No, I don't think people it's such a hardened society right now where I think that and they'll probably think, oh, he's a child molester or he's a big pussy, and he'll just be laughed out of town.
Yeah.
That is unfortunate. That's unfortunate.
Okay, next up, you know me with the superheroes.
Dude.
Okay, here we go. Now this show, the show that I'm citing is not exactly the show that I'm listing as my favorite, but bear with me on this.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, on WNEW, I was going to say FM, on WNEW, which was, it started as Metro Media. It's now Fox. It's now the Fox affiliate. They had a package of superhero cartoons from the 60s, which were the Aquaman and Batman cartoons from Filmation in the 60s. In the middle, there were these really creepy Wild Wild West-ish, heavy on the watercolors Lone Ranger cartoons, and the package was called Superheroes.
Oh, yeah, I remember the Lone Ranger cartoon.
Yeah, there's one on a Lone Ranger box set that I have, and it's just really weird. That was my exposure to the Aquaman cartoons, which to me, hands down, are so much fun.
Yeah.
Ridiculously designed villains. They didn't take too much from the comic. They took the Fisherman and they took Black Manta. Apart from that, they have some really fugly villains. With the end of the world narration from Ted Knight, and Aquaman, to save Tusky the Walrus from the clutches of the ocean master, sends a barracuda, a manta ray, and a crab. And the crab always did the most work. Yeah. Just loved the Aquaman Filmation cartoons. There's a joy to them. It's a guy and a sidekick, and they have these giant seahorses. And Tusky the Walrus, who is a progenitor of Scooby-Doo, predates Scooby-Doo, which is the rollicking, cute animal that hangs out with them. Pet. It's just a series that seemed to do everything right. Now, Filmation was also known for very limited animation, so the way you would see Superman fly in one episode was exactly the way you would see Superman fly in the next one, which was exactly, they had used a lot of stock, and they used that their entire history, even up to He-Man. I mean, He-Man laughing, there's like one shot of He-Man laughing. So the show that it originally aired as part of was the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure, which just even sounds like a great name. And this was part of the 1967-68 season on CBS, which was so superhero dominated. And, again, that makes sense because the Batman 66 show was still in full gear. And that was its time. And just an amazing package when you look what else is part of that series with Superman cartoons and Superboy cartoons with Krypto, and then rotating Justice League of America, Teen Titans, and solo Justice League members in cartoons. Just an amazing 1 hour package. for a comic book fan, just unreal. And, though I really saw the Aquaman cartoons separated from what it was initially combined with, I eventually saw that other stuff. And so that is my number 5, the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure.
Good Lord.
Okay, what do you got next there?
I haven't seen that in ages and ages. My next one, back to robots and 8 and 9 and 10-year-old Tito, is Voltron.
Oh,
Voltron.
okay.
Voltron was just up there with Robotech, ruled my brother and I's lives. We just loved the Lion Voltron and the Space Voltron. We did not, again, they probably only aired like the same 8 episodes over and over again, but we just could not get enough. And oh my gosh, just thinking about it, I just got just the excitement of those TV shows and teamwork and a different super Robeast every week. And they were, and I just, again, these are half-hour commercials. We could not wait for these toys to come out and us to get our hands on these toys. But loved Voltron. And
and I think
85,
one of the most
86.
One of the most, like I said, I've watched very little Voltron, but I've just watched last year. I watched all of Go Lion, which is the Lion Force Voltron. And I think one of the most interesting things is she's Allura in Go Lion. What's the princess's name in Voltron?
Oh gosh, I'm not the pink one. I can't think of it right
somebody
now.
who should be a damsel in distress just kind of steps up and like, no, you need a member of the team. I'm helping you out. And I think that's just a really novel approach to a female character become part of the team. Somebody that by definition should be the one that they're protecting, and that is sort of their message after a point. Becomes something different. And also, watching the original Go Lion is far more violent than you'll see. There's a lot of cannibalism.
Yes.
And it's really, really creepy. So when I do actually watch Voltron, and I plan to, I have a lot of stuff copied. It'll be interesting to see what was excised, because there's some stuff that I saw that there's just no way they can talk about this on.
And it just and the way they would kill these monsters, just slice them apart 3 different ways, like Benihana over there.
Okay, well, mine was a different time as well. I don't know how specifically to refer to this, so I'm just going to put it under the blanket cover of Looney Tunes. So that's my number 4. We had Looney Tunes in various forms. We had the original cartoons, which were part of various syndication packages from the 30s and 40s. Some of the later cartoons were on CBS in the morning for us as part of the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner Hour.
Same here.
They tamed them down a little bit when you got to the 40s and 50s, just like everything kind of tamed down. But there's something so raucous about some of those 30s and 40s, particularly Bugs Bunny. That is humor that I will, to this day, I can recite things off, without even any coaching. A lot of that the stuff Russian dog. Part of I don't deserve to live. I mean, you just throw something at me and I will remember it. Stuff I say to this day, like my public, how they love me. There's just, he was our first cross-dresser. However, you look at it.
Yankees.
But there's such a sense of joy, and it's not exactly a fair comparison, because I think South Park is a different vibe, but nothing was really off limits in a sense. And I think out of any animated series that predated television, it's the one that holds up. Disney looks like it was made 50, 60, 70 years ago, and it's a mentality that's 50, 60, 70 years old. You look at the Warner Brothers cartoons, and they have that age, but they're so smart. They have such the finger on comedic timing and universal comedic themes. Even if it's something very specific, like making fun of a movie star of the day, you might not have never seen Katharine Hepburn before, but
Humphrey Bogart or Bing Crosby, but it's still
seeing this Little Red Riding Hood's like, I'm looking for my grandmother, Riley. I am. You just you know that there's a nuance to it, and oh my God, I love those so much, and there's a lot that would still make me laugh, and not just from a nostalgic standpoint, just because they are so sharp and so genuinely funny.
When I revisit those as a kid, I watched every single episode, and I never laughed. I rarely did I laugh out loud at cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, once you get to understand comedic timing and themes and why things are funny, I will watch those, and my brother and I will just laugh our asses off. But as a kid, it was just I enjoyed watching it.
Mm-hmm.
As you begin to appreciate it more, Louis C.K. mentioned something in one of his stand-up. He's talking about Bugs Bunny versus Mickey Mouse, and just talking about how he hates Mickey Mouse because he just says Bugs Bunny's a great guy. He's funny. You want to have a drink with him. Mickey Mouse is just, oh no, water. It's so true.
I also had an acting teacher who,
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest takeaways I got from him was when we were talking about great actors and the importance of voice in projecting what you need to project. And I think voice actors have a harder job because you can't see their facial expressions. They have to match what is going to be animated against or what's already been animated.
Yeah.
And I think that's a harder toe. And he said to me, if you're looking for the best American actor, do not look to De Niro. Do not look to somebody Pacino. Look to Mel Blanc.
Exactly.
Because he had the hardest job of any of them. And
even when his on-camera roles, like his role in he had like reoccurring bit parts in the Jack Benny show,
Mm-hmm.
very stone-faced, but he could just say a few words and it'll just steal the scene right there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're coming towards our
June
top.
Foray. We can talk about June Foray for hours. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we're coming towards our top. So what do you got there at number 3?
Number 3, let me go down the look. Oh, speaking of 3, I'm at number 3, and it's going to match what I'm going to talk about. Three's Company. Again, as a kid, loved the show, watched it religiously because it was I would watch the first runs, and then I would watch the reruns in the afternoon. And everything, just the sexual innuendo, the misunderstanding. I had no idea what being a single was like, being a single adult in Santa Monica was like in the late 70s and early 80s. What attracted to me was the physical comedy and the whole misunderstanding, or there's hanky-panky going on. You don't want to let Mr. Roper or Mr. Furley hang. I thought Jack Tripper was a live-action Bugs Bunny for me at the time, and I thought he was so hip because in his room he had that Beatle poster. But oh gosh, it was just time stop whenever that stupid show was on, and I felt like a semi-grown up. I mean, the concept of a bar, the Regal Beagle, a watering hole was kind of foreign to me, but it's just that's the adult clubhouse, and I just and then Larry, who was just the original Quagmire from South Park, I just thought he was just the funniest thing. And I think I mentioned this on one of the previous podcasts. There was sort of like not a personal but a real life connection. Whenever we would walk home from school, we would always see Larry Klein, the person who played Larry from Three's Company. We would always see him drive his Porsche, kind of turn off this one street in off of Ventura Boulevard, and we would wave at him, and he would wave back to us every single day walking from school. So he just then it's like, oh shit, the show's canceled. We're not going to see him anymore. But Three's Company. Loved that show. Loved the wardrobe, Larry's sweater.
Oh God, Mrs. Roper. I mean, it was like they raided my aunt's closet for Mrs. Roper. My aunt Shirley, she was Mrs. Roper in full moo glory.
Dude, we had my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Rangel, and you can fact check this with my brother and everyone who went to Liggett Street School in 1986. She was a hybrid of Mrs. Roper and Gene Simmons, man.
That's terrifying.
She had the moo-moos. She had this psychotic eye makeup, frizzy Gene Simmons hair, and oh, dude, she was Mrs. Rangel was Gene Simmons, the love child of or the mother of those two
Okay.
Love it.
I do have a Three's Company related story in relation to me almost getting somebody fired. After I graduated college, there were 2 times that I gave acting a go. And the second time around, I shot an industrial film. And there was one scene where it was after hours at work. Okay, there was like, so people were, talking about what they were going to do. And there's just a lot of ad-libbing going on. And so I'm against this one guy, and we're like young executives or something. I don't know what the hell we were, but we had suit and ties and all that. So he just goes into improv mode. I thought we would just do bullshit talking, but he was like character. And he said, well, what are you doing after work? And I don't know what come over me, but I said, well, I was probably just going to meet Janet and Chrissy at the Regal Beagle. And this dude laughed so hard that it broke the scene up. And they almost canned him because he could not regain composure. He was laughing so hard every time we tried to do the scene again.
Oh my God.
So sorry, whoever you are, dude. Your name's, and I don't even know where that came from. It just it's part of us, The Regal Beagle was what the local watering hole was to us. Okay, my number 3, and I have a feeling this is going to be on your list too, upcoming. And it is known in Japan as Gatchaman or Science Ninja Team Gatchaman. Yes. But for us, it was Battle of the Planets. With a name that was as close to Star Wars as you could make without getting sued. Details the story of G-Force, which is a team of 5 scientifically enhanced and trained ninja warriors who dress up as birds and can form the fiery phoenix. And, oh my God, I think someday we should have our friend. You don't know her yet, but she is your friend, Tito, Wendy Freeman, and we should just have one day that we just go off on all things Gatchaman and Battle of the Planets, because it's, to me, the best example of how crazy and joyous an Americanization of a Japanese property could be. It was a team of 5. It was great characterization. You watch the original Gatchaman, there's a hell of a lot more soap opera. There's a hell of a lot more violence. There's a hell of a lot more weight to what's actually happening. But, to a kid, this was, I would have killed for G-Force toys.
I would have. Lunchbox.
I had the lunchbox. I had the Milton Bradley game. There was very little merch around.
There was, I don't remember there being any action figures back then, but I had the lunchbox.
Yeah. And, when you hit the 80s, with He-Man, there's this advent of tremendous synergy with toy lines and programming, which you didn't get in the 70s. And there were some laws about that as well after Hot Wheels had premiered in, I think, 70 or 71, because the argument was made that it was effectively like, a half an hour commercial for a toy line. And we can slam Ronald Reagan for a lot of things, but I think he's indirectly responsible for deregulation that gave us He-Man and Voltron. So you didn't have these barriers of shows that would effectively promote toy lines. That was gone. You could have toy lines based on a show, but you couldn't have shows based on a toy line effectively. And as that got relaxed, particularly in syndication, it took a while for that to hit network TV. I think in terms of enjoyment of properties, I think the 80s were probably a better time to grow up than the 70s, just in terms of just the volume of what you had. But, man, I got to tell you that that Battle of the Planets, it still doesn't bore me. You put it on for me, and I will be there for the entire 23 minutes that it airs. Even with the really cheap Seven Zark 7 animation, which is like I could do. If you told me to do Seven Zark 7, I could animate that for what they did.
It is so flimsy, and it is such a lazy clone of R2-D2 and C-3PO,
but there's just something about that. Some of it was like my first exposure to Japanese animation. Because I didn't see stuff like Astro Boy and Gigantor till I was an adult. I didn't see any of that stuff. The only thing I saw was Speed Racer and Marine Boy. And again, this goes into the differences between markets. New York, that stuff didn't air. You went to Philadelphia, you did have Speed Racer and you did have Marine Boy being aired on some of their local stations. And I remember when we would go on vacation to Wildwood, New Jersey, it was like I had to just I told my parents, even like a little kid, I was bullying them. It's like, no, I'm watching TV for this hour.
Yeah,
I
no,
do
we
not get
rarely
this at
got
home.
Speed Racer.
Yeah. That's something that that's one area where I do become a grumpy old man when people complain about access to shows. It's like, dude, you have it so easy. We've never had it easier to watch the stuff. We basically can, with some minor exceptions, can punch up anything we want to see.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, there's, of course we have our lost television. Of course that exists, but we got it good now, and we didn't have that growing up. Even even though you were in you're more in the VCR era than I am, but people gotta remember, like, VCR tapes were fucking expensive. They were like $10 a pop. That's like the equivalent of like 25 nowadays. Just imagine 25 for a disc. A CD or a DVD that you would burn.
Yeah, it's not happening.
Yeah. I mean, I was so judicious with what I would tape when we finally got a VCR in 84. Well, that's a whole other discussion. All right, so Battle of the Planets. So what do you have up? We're coming to our tops here. What do you got there at number 2 there?
Okay, now I am gonna echo your previous pick, Battle of the Planets.
Yes.
And I think it's because now that we're talking about that, I'm thinking about it. The same reason why I like Voltron, I was just loved that there was a team of young people getting together for a whole to defend humanity. And
also, this is something I think is important to know. These were young people that looked like young people we would see. These were young people with long hair.
I was just going to say, they looked like rock stars.
Yeah.
And then there was Mark and Jason were Mick and Keith.
Yeah.
Tiny was the drummer. Kiep was the keyboard player. And I can't think of the woman's name, but she was Kim Deal. She was Kim Deal. They look like a band. And, when I first saw that, I was maybe 7, 8 years old when I first saw that, maybe even 6. So, the concept of Japanese stuff, I knew that this wasn't from around here because these cartoons didn't look like Bugs Bunny. So I knew that something was up with these, but I still loved that. And I just, oh, dude, they had great hair, man. And it wasn't until much, much later, maybe about 10 years ago, when I first got the DVD, my first Battle of the Planet DVD set, which included the corresponding Japanese version of Gatchaman. And it was just like discovering the TV show all over again. Mm-hmm. And when you say it was much more mature themes, much more violent, and even longer because they didn't have the 7 little bits, to fill in the parts that they cut out from the original stuff, kids' parents dying and just violence and just a soap opera, really. And
dogs losing limbs. I mean, just like crazy shit. It's not that you wouldn't get away with it. You still can't get away with it.
I think that's the last taboo is you can't shoot animals or cruelty to animals.
Yeah,
and just oh god, even down to the original theme song of Gotcha Man.
Yeah.
Yes. Gatchaman, Battle of the Planets, and I haven't seen every episode, the original Gatchaman episodes of the American version, so it's always fun to rediscover those still. So I'll be sad when I see them all.
Yeah. Okay, my next one is one that we've already talked about, and whether you call it Hal Roach's Rascals or Our Gang or The Little Rascals, it is The Little Rascals that is my number 2. Something that this also instilled in me is a lifelong fascination with the Hal Roach Studios, which also produced the Laurel and Hardy shorts, which later became a feature-length film series with the two gentlemen, and these smaller, wonderful comedians like Charlie Chase or Thelma Todd and Zazu Pitts. There was effectively a more grown-up version of Our Gang called The Boyfriends, which used some of the same actors when they became teenagers. I just outright love almost everything that came out of the Hal Roach Studios. I'm fascinated with that company's history, how they maintained independence even with a distribution deal from MGM. That's one book that's been written that I wish I could have written. I wish I had known these people. Talk about reading about circumstances where people were creating art, and it doesn't sound any more joyous than if you read the accounts of the Hal Roach Studios. And you can see that in the films. It looks like they were loving what they were doing and they loved going to work. My first exposure to any of that was the Little Rascals. So
Oh.
number 2. All right, what's your top spot there?
Is this mine? Oh, this is my number one. My number one is the Brady Bunch.
Okay.
The Brady Bunch. Growing up, I think from my first earliest memories of watching TV is of the Brady Bunch. Now, where I grew up, I don't know where it is regionally, but in Los Angeles, the Brady Bunch was on at least 6 times a day, every day, from 1974, from when it ended up until about high school for me, which is probably about 1990-ish when I kind of stopped. But probably by the time I was 5 years old, I've seen every episode of the Brady Bunch at least 4 times by that point. Now, it was before we went to school, it was on. When we got back home from school, it was on twice a day. Probably the reason why I love Mystery Science Theater 3000 so much. My brother and my sister and I at the breakfast table, we would love riffing on the Brady kids and the Brady parents. We loved making fun of them, but at the same time, we loved these kids also. As dorky as they were, we had a genuine love for these kids. And to this day, I still get such joy out of just watching those episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this all the time. Brady Bunch, better show for me. Partridge Family, they're a much better band.
What's your favorite Brady Bunch episode?
The Hawaii trilogy.
Okay, all right.
I had no idea what
There's
Hawaii was.
There's a lot goes on in that one. Oh my God.
I had no idea. That was my introduction to Hawaii. You're 4 years old. I didn't know what Hawaii was until I saw the Brady Bunch and just, I want to go there. I want to go there. And then when the Gutierrez family, when we finally went to Hawaii in 1982, I wanted to find Bobby Brady's tiki. I wanted to go to this cave. Where's Don Ho? So I still get a joy out of those. I still love riffing on them. I still love goofing on them. And as dorky as all of those characters are, all of those kids are, I still think they're the coolest kids ever.
It's so funny. I cannot say I'm a Brady Bunch fan. You know, it's nothing. You know, I enjoyed it growing up. I enjoyed the movies in the '90s, and even some of the reunion. Like, I never missed a reunion. I never missed as bad as they were, like the Brady Brides.
God,
bad as they got. I probably have watched every piece of Brady television that's ever been. The Brady Kids with Ping and Pong, and like every bit, which is just out on DVD now. People should know.
It's crazy with all the extended Brady shows, the Brady Brides. As a little kid, I got the same excitement as I did when this is kind of it's almost like, oh my God, a progression to the Brady story.
Mm-hmm.
It was so exciting to me, as bad as it was. I recently watched all of the Brady Bunch Variety Hour.
Yeah.
Maybe in the past 6 months, I finally got around to watching them all, and it's just so fascinating. Here is another Brady universe that a continuation of it, and I just thought it was fascinating, as bad as it was, but still, and I work just less than a mile from the Brady house. So if you're ever in LA, when you get to LA, we're gonna go see the Brady house.
Okay. All right, my number one, I have talked about this on a number of podcasts. If people follow me, you're bored of this statement, but I'm going to say it again because it's an important thing in my life. September 8th, 1973, 9 a.m. I was one little kid at 9 a.m. I was another little kid by 9:58, 9:59 when Schoolhouse Rock was over. The premiere of the Super Friends changed my life. You watch it today. Oh, baby, it's painful, some of them. Oh, baby. I mean, there's just it's the clear-cut prime example of how sanitized some elements of 70s children's television had become. You never see Super Friends throw a punch. You might see Superman throw Solomon Grundy once into rocks, but they're not going to hurt him because he's Solomon Grundy. So the level of violence just is non-existent because of action for children's television and all that shit. But there was something about the nature of teamwork and morality that really, really got me in the sweet spot at the age that I was just the prime age for that. 6 years old, just perfect. And that instilled an interest in comics for me, which has followed me through my life. And, I just can't speak highly enough. I don't enjoy them as much watching those. Like, if you presented almost any other show that I mentioned or watching something from the Super Friends, I probably would opt for something else that I mentioned on the lower 9. But there was something about growing up with that particular dynamic of a team and a very cool headquarters. And
oh, dude, amazing.
I'm much more of a Wendy Marvin and Wonder Dog guy than a Wonder Twins and Gleek guy. But you had, in those younger characters, you had somebody that you could relate to that brought you into this team, and they were active members of the team in whatever incarnation. That remains my number one for. I can't see anything ever unseating that in terms of nostalgia for childhood memories or for what it did to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember that day so clearly. I was just riveted to the television, and by that afternoon, the first Mego figures had come out by then, and I had Superman and Aquaman when we went in the afternoon to a trip to Great Eastern, which was like a Caldors Bradley's type of store. And man, it instilled something in me that's never left. So, I don't think you can have a better illustration of importance than that. So.
Well, yeah. When people say Saturday morning cartoons, for me, it's two shows: the Smurfs and Super Friends. That is Saturday morning for me, right there.
And I do feel bad for kids now that they don't have that experience. And we probably were as active as kids were, but there was something about blocking off Saturday mornings. I never remember going.
Stopped. Time stopped.
I mean, if I played with the neighbor kids down the block, it wasn't until noon at earliest. It just didn't happen. And I remember the biggest change for me was in '78, when the year before I had soccer in the afternoons, and then in '78 the matches were at 11 a.m. and I couldn't watch Tarzan and the Super 7 until they were in repeats, and I was in agony. I put on a good face because I was a pretty good wing on soccer, but man, there's part of me that was really wishing that it was one day it rained and I literally yelled for joy because I could finally watch Tarzan and the Super 7, and I just couldn't do it because of the time it was on.
It was like me being at my my uncle's funeral, missing that one episode of Robotech, but every weekend.
Oh my god!
It is funny. I visited his grave recently because he's right next to my grandmother. That's all I fucking think about. It's like I missed an episode of Robotech.
You should have sang one of Min-May's songs then.
And I was singing, all the bells are ringing. Saturday morning. We really weren't very active. It was just after Saturday morning cartoons, maybe we'd go out for brunch, but it was more TV.
Yeah,
a really bad TV movie,
And my parents were cool about it. They knew if we had to do something and it could be done on Sunday instead of Saturday, they'd do it on Sunday.
Yeah.
There's just something that concentrated block of television, and some of it was just sometimes you just watch what was on. It didn't even matter.
The Rubik's Cube cartoon for me, or the Pac-Man cartoon.
Oh, for me it was just like I said, the Sid and Marty Krofft shows. I couldn't stand them, but I know them.
Yeah.
I know the Electra Woman and Dyna Girl theme.
Such a great song.
Yeah. So that's one thing where I don't think progress has done us good. I hope at some point, at least on the retro stations, that they do have Saturday morning-ish blocks. Whether it's MeTV or something, because I think I tune in.
Yeah.
I tune in bed for 4 hours. Oh, absolutely. 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, absolutely.
Or even get up at 6 a.m. to watch Davy and Goliath also, because they would show Davy and Goliath on Channel 5 over here really, really early in the mornings.
My father hated
we got church
Goliath.
out of the way.
My father hated Davy and Goliath. It's like, why are you watching that shit?
Wow.
Davy, the pastor says it's okay, Davy. He'd like mock it as I was on it.
Dad, please.
And my father would get like just really like looking back, I'm like, Dad, you shouldn't have been saying that in front of the little kid. It's like, the pastor says it's okay to pull up Sally's dress, Davy. Davy and Goliath, man. Oh.
Such a great show.
Yeah. That's something I bet we would have a blast watching together. Mm-hmm. Some Davy and Goliath. We got to do that at some point.
Yeah, we need to. But I'm just wondering, how long would we last before we say this show sucks? Turn this crap off.
Yeah. All right, that's the Tito and Bill Goodtime Hour for this entry, and we'll be back again soon.
We love you very much, and it's been a good time.
Here's the story of a lovely lady who was bringing up 3 very lovely girls. All of them had hair of gold, like their mother, the youngest one in curls.
It's the story of a man named Brady who was busy with 3 boys of his own. They were 4 men living all together, yet they were all alone. Till the one day when the lady met this fellow, and they knew that it was much more than a hunch, that this group must somehow form a family. That's the way we all became the Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch. That's the way we became.